We're going to get started with our last research symposium of the week, Digital Media Exposure Tracing Social and Mental Health Impacts Across Development. This symposium explores the psychological, social, and neurobiological effects of digital media use and the need for developmental and identity-informed approaches to guide screen time practices and digital policy. Our first presentation is Longitudinal Associations Between Social Media and Mental Health Among Adolescents, the COMPASS Study, from Madelyn Curle. Madelyn is a doctoral student at the Behavioral Epidemiology Lab at the University of Alberta, where she studies screen time and screen time policies' effects on mental health outcomes. Madelyn?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Madelyn, and I'm a PhD student at the Behavioral Epidemiology Lab at the U of A. So a little bit of background on this issue. Social media use could be defined as any online resource designed to facilitate engagement between individuals. And social media use is almost ubiquitous these days, especially among adolescents. So social media use has increased around 10% among Ontario, Canada students from 2013 to 2019. At the same time, there have also been declines in self-reported mental health among this same cohort of individuals, with significant declines in self-reported mental health and well-being among adolescents. So on the right of your screen, you can see a graph showing trends from 2007 to 2019. And the orange line represents students who rated their mental health as fair or poor in comparison to good, very good, or excellent. And the numbers have increased significantly. There is also gendered variation with respect to both social media use and mental health outcomes, with girls reporting more intensive and problematic social media use and more psychosomatic symptoms than boys. I'm not sure if you guys are attuned to the Canadian news cycle, but this is kind of big news. There's some policy and legislation debates, as well as legal debates, about the access of adolescents to social media use, with Ontario school boards last year suing social media companies such as TikTok and Snapchat. And they're alleging that students are experiencing an attention, learning, and mental health crisis because of social media products. So among all these rumblings, we had two study objectives. We wanted to examine the longitudinal associations between social media use and mental health outcomes among a large sample of Canadian adolescents. As a second objective, we wanted to see if these associations were moderated by gender. So to do this, we used data from the COMPASS study. This is a large prospective cohort study of Canadian high school-aged students. We used a linked longitudinal cohort from the 2021-22 and 2022-23 school years, and this amounted to over 26,000 participants. So for the exposure, we looked at social media duration in hours per day, and this was a self-reported exposure by the students. And we looked at a handful of mental health outcomes, including mental illness outcomes of depression and anxiety symptoms, and positive mental health outcomes such as flourishing, personal relationships, and emotional regulation. So for our moderator variable, we looked at gender. We had 3 gender categories we studied, including cisgender girls, cisgender boys, and transgender, gender-diverse adolescents. So the COMPASS study gives rise to hierarchical or clustered data, and we used multi-level modeling to control for this. We had a 3-level multi-level model with level 1 as repeated measures within the same student, level 2 as our more traditional covariates of age, perceived socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, and gender. And then level 3 controlled for clustering within schools, so we use school ID for that. So on to some results. So the plots you see here represent the association between social media time on the x-axis and depression and anxiety symptoms on the y-axis over time, so over the 1 year we studied. Our plots are also broken up by gender, with cisgender girls represented in green, cisgender boys in orange, and transgender, gender-diverse adolescents in purple. So as you can see, as social media use increased, so did depression and anxiety symptoms significantly among all gender categories. But the story gets more interesting because there was gender moderation that was significant, and this is visualized by the differences in slopes within the same plots. So as you can see by the green stars, cisgender girls experienced significantly steeper associations between social media use and mental illness symptoms in comparison to both cisgender boys and transgender and gender diverse adolescents. So now we can look at the positive mental health outcomes. So again, we have social media use on the x-axis and flourishing, emotional regulation, and personal relationships on the y-axis. As social media time increased, positive mental health decreased significantly among all gender categories. But again, there was significant gender moderation effects, as you can see by the differences in slopes. So for all three positive mental health outcomes, cisgender girls experienced a steeper negative association between social media use and positive mental health outcomes in comparison to cisgender boys. And then for the flourishing and emotional regulation outcomes, transgender and gender diverse youth experienced a steeper negative association between social media use and these outcomes in comparison to cisgender boys. Okay, so what does this all mean? We saw that social media use was significantly associated with increased mental illness and ill-being outcomes over time. And while the effects we saw were small, since almost all adolescents use social media use, this could relate to large population scale effects. We also saw that the social media and mental health association was moderated by gender over time, with cisgender girls experiencing steeper associations between social media use and negative mental health outcomes. So implications of this work include that policies should consider interventions to reduce adolescents' time spent on social media. And also, as there is gendered variation with these associations, maybe some outreach and support targeted directly towards cisgender girls and transgender and gender diverse youth could be helpful. So for some future directions of this work, we were only able to study social media duration as our exposure variable, but there is some super compelling evidence that the type of social media use could be a better predictor of mental health outcomes. So by type of social media use, we could mean active social media use, so like commenting, liking, messaging posts, as opposed to passive social media use, like scrolling through TikTok for a million years, or daytime versus nighttime use, that sort of thing. So it would be interesting to look at this same cohort, a large cohort, and see if type of social media use is a better predictor of mental health outcomes. Also, as there are policies and legal debates about adolescents' access to social media use, it would be interesting to see if these policies are associated with any changes to the mental health among adolescents. Maybe sort of a quasi-experimental design could be super interesting because then we can actually get to some causal inferences. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors of this study, and especially Dr. Valerie Carson, who is my supervisor at the University of Alberta. I'd also like to acknowledge the Compass study for letting us use their data, and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research for funding. I look forward to any questions you may have. Yeah, totally. So it's Canadian high school age students. The lowest age was around grade 7 and up to like grade 12, or secondary 1 through 5 in Quebec, because they have different grades.
And just following up, did you break it down into rules
Yeah, totally. So if you didn't hear, the question was if we broke down this data by different age groups. No, we didn't. That was outside the scope of this research study, but there is some evidence that age is a very good predictor of how this association goes. So that would be some interesting future work, but no, we just looked at age as a covariate, so we controlled for that in the models. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Madeline. That was really good. I'm really encouraged by all the gender analysis that I've seen at the conference so far. Just a quick reminder, and I forgot to mention this initially, there are some microphones here in the aisles, so you can raise your hand and speak from your seat, or you may use the microphones in the aisles to ask your questions. Just line up behind them when you're ready. Our next presentation is from Dr. Sheri Madigan with longitudinal perspectives on digital technology use, peer relations, problems, and prosocial behavior in childhood. Sheri is a clinical psychologist, professor, and Canada Research Chair in Determinants of Child Development at the University of Calgary and the Alberta Children's Hospital Research Institute. Sheri.
Okay. So I am here to actually present data on behalf of my postdoctoral fellow who couldn't come. So, Elizabeth couldn't be here, but this is part of her postdoctoral work. So I'm going to talk about the longitudinal perspectives on digital technology use, peer relation problems, and prosocial behavior in childhood. Earlier this morning, I talked a little bit about sort of what's going on, what's happening with kids and how much they're using devices, and here are some more stats. So we know that 94% of kids ages 0 to 8 have access to mobile devices, and as I mentioned this morning, there's been a real saturation of devices within homes now, with 20 to 25 devices per household on average in the US. I think these stats are from 2024. So one of the things that we've tried to do in our group that I think really builds nicely from the last presentation is really to take a developmental lens to screen time. And that's important for a few reasons. We want to know, we want to assume that development changes over time for better or for worse, and that we want to really follow and track that development because we want to see what that means for children's outcomes. So if screen time goes up or screen time goes down, do we see some kind of commensurate benefit or risk to children depending on the patterning of those associations? We also know that from a developmental perspective, children's social skills and peer relationships tend to unfold over time, so they're really concentrated at home in the early years. They engage in parallel play and play beside kids, and then eventually they start to play with other peers and engage in more relationships. So it's really important to follow not only screen time over that developmental period, but to also follow peer relationship problems to see how they're patterning together. We also know that patterns of screen time really matter. It matters based on your developmental stage. So if we follow the guidelines, there's less screen time at the beginning, and kids get more and more screen time as they age. And we're really interested in terms of both these components of child development across stages. So I showed this earlier today, but just really reminding everyone that children are within this circle of care and this digital ecosystem. And today I'm going to talk about individual differences at the child level in particular, but we know that there are a variety of nested layers that impact children's development and their screen use. Recently, one of the things that Elizabeth and I have been doing as part of our postdoctoral fellowship is something called an umbrella review. So people have been doing wonderful meta-analyses, and what we've been doing is actually characterizing those meta-analyses. So we do a systematic review of all the research on screen time that have been done within the context of meta-analytic work to try to characterize where's the work been done in terms of meta-analyses of individual studies, but where are the gaps? And what you can see here is there are lots of meta-analyses synthesizing data on associations between screen time and academic outcomes, and on associations between screen time and mental health outcomes. But a pretty big gap, and in the transition, that cute little thing, it's going to look a lot cuter, but I don't know, from Canva to PowerPoint, it didn't work. But we're really thinking about what about social outcomes. So that's a real gap. We don't know a lot about what about screen time and social outcomes. And so part of this study is an effort to fill that gap a little bit. So earlier, I talked about how there's clearer data on the association in early childhood around as quantity of screen time goes up, we see behavioral problems go up, and then there's lower developmental skills tend to be poorer for language, physical activity, sleep, and things like that. But for social outcomes, we don't really have clear risks or potential benefits. It could be one or the other. And so we really went into this open-minded to the fact that there could be some risks of screen use on children's pro-social and peer relationship outcomes. So here are some examples here. The risks are that it could displace time with peers, it could replace important interactions, it might interrupt the development of social skills, and it might contribute to peer relationship problems. But there are potential benefits of screen use for pro-social and peer relations. So it might facilitate social interaction. It might help youth overcome barriers. Some kids seek support networks online, and that's really helpful for their peer relationships and positive development. I've listened to my 14-year-old for years have to really work with other kids as he's gaming and learn to problem solve and game together to come up to the ultimate benefit of winning something on some gaming system. I don't know how they work, so that's a general. Something happens that benefits everyone in the end, but it comes through cooperation and problem solving. So what we wanted to do in this study is look at the trajectories of digital technology use. So we really wanted to track it over time, and then look how these trajectories relate to children's outcomes in terms of their social development. So this was drawing from the Growing Up in Ireland study, which is a large cohort of over 10,000 Irish children. They were born in 2008 and have been followed up over time. And what we have is data on their screen time and pro-social and peer relationship skills when they were 3, 5, 7, and 9. And the methods were really parent questionnaires. They filled out, all the parents filled it out, and it was digital technology use, so a caregiver report, and then they filled out what's called the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire, which has a number of sub scales, including a subscale on pro-social behavior and peer relationship problems. And we performed trajectory analysis using latent growth curve modeling. What you can see here is we're really picking out profiles amongst these 10,000 kids of how they go about using screen time. So about 38% of the kids are what we would characterize as being stably high in their screen use. And I'll show you in a minute how that patterns across development. But basically, they started high, they stayed high. 35% had low screen time and were increasing. 16% had high screen time at the outset at age 3, but then decreased over time. And then we have a group that just stayed pretty low over time. And so you can see that in the patterning here around at age 3, 5, 7, and 9, and this is their hours and duration of screen time on the left. You can see these 4 groups. So stable high, they started high, they stayed high. So really speaks to the habitual nature of screen use. And when kids get on screens and have high doses early, there's a good subset of them that stay that way over time. And then we have the low stable group, so just not really on screens too much. And then we have 2 interesting crossover points, kids who started high and decreased over time, and then kids who started relatively lower and increased almost as high as the kids who were stable the entire time. When you get this type of patterning of trajectories, it makes looking at outcomes really interesting because you can look to see, oh, when screen time decreased, did that matter for some other outcome of children's development? So what we did find, and this is a pretty similar thing that people would find, is you compare the stable high group and the stable low group and you say, are they different? So we're really looking at the two tails of the distribution here, the kids who got very little screen time over time and the kids who got a lot. And no surprise, the differences between them are significantly different in terms of prosocial behavior and peer relationships problems, in that the kids who had stable high screen time had fewer prosocial behaviors and more peer problems. So what that looks like if we put that into a case example is if we use Liam here at age 3, he began using screens extensively by 3, often spending hours each day watching videos or playing games. This pattern remained consistent into his middle school years. By age 5, his caregivers noticed he struggled to take turns and show empathy during play and had frequent conflict with peers. Over time, these difficulties persisted. So that characterizes that group. But really interestingly, we had the group that had high decreasing screen time, so high at the beginning and decreasing. They actually showed more pronounced increases in prosocial behavior over time. So those decreases in screen time led to more pronounced increases in prosocial behavior. So in a case example, that looks like this. Amara had high screen time as well as a preschooler, but her parents made a conscious effort to gradually reduce her screen time starting around the age of 5. They replaced screen time activities with more family interaction and structured play. By age 7, Amara not only caught up with her peers socially, but began to show strong prosocial skills like helping classmates and resolving conflicts calmly. So that's kind of how, in a case example, these would play out. So the implications of this are that, these high doses of technology, high quantity contributes to poor peer relationship problems and decreased engagement in prosocial behavior. And we do find this variation by trajectory class really supporting the notion that when kids see some reductions in screen time, we see benefits actually to their outcomes. And just in terms of future directions, we want to advocate for more nuanced consideration. We just looked at quantity. It's really important to look at context and content and what kids are doing on screens, and even how they're negotiating their time on screens themselves, which could be really interesting. This is obviously a community sample, so we don't have clinical data, which is important, and that tells us who really needs the support. And then more novel methods. This is all single informant caregiver report. So I'm going to end there because my time is almost up, but I'm happy to take any questions and thank our partners and our funders. And if there's any questions, I have a minute left to take them. Oh yeah, yes.
So I have a question about the shared informant reporting.
Yeah.
So particularly given sort of the narratives about what parents might expect with these, is there any concern that parents who, for example, were purposefully decreasing their kids' screen time were also very prone to see, we're looking for, so I guess I'm...
Oh, 100%, yeah. Like it might be that parents there's bias in single informant. So they might say, they don't know we're looking at these two variables in particular, but we don't know. So it's always better to have multi-informant, multi-methods, multi-waves. So here we have multi-waves and I think it would be, any future study where we can have multi-method and multi-informant would be a real advantage for the field. Yeah. Any other burning questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering how the low increasing group performed on those measures. Did they show any changes in prosocial behavior? Was the slope like less steep?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually didn't see any any relation to any of their outcomes in particular. So it might be that because they're increasing now. And when we looked at the outcomes, it's just that we're not seeing any difference. It might be that they've managed to, increase their screen time without any potential risk, or that they developed some of the social skills they needed early and it's not impacting their later development. We don't know, but it's actually it's a really great question. Yeah. It might be too early to tell, actually. Yeah. And my time is up. I have the red card. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Madigan, and that's really interesting work. I love seeing such good analysis of such a deep data set. Our next presentation, Teen Girls with Fewer Positive and More Negative Experiences on Social Media Show Heightened Neural Sensitivity to Social Evaluation, comes from Dr. Jennifer Silk. Jennifer is a professor of psychology at the University of Pittsburgh. Her research focuses on the development of affective disorders in adolescents, such as anxiety, depression, and suicidality. Dr. Silk.
Hi, everybody. I am a clinical psychologist at the University of Pittsburgh, and we all know that we are experiencing a youth mental health crisis right now. And there's been a lot of interest, especially at this conference, in the potential role of social media use in this crisis. So there have been many claims in the media and by some researchers that social media is damaging the teen brain. But in terms of the research, we actually know very little about how social media use is affecting the brain, and this was highlighted in the panel yesterday by Lucia, where she highlighted that this field is really in its infancy. And most of the past work has relied on retrospective self-report of total screen time rather than specific social media experiences. And there's also a consensus among researchers that we really need to better understand these specific nuanced social media experiences that may be impactful for brain development, brain function, as well as mental health. And so in my lab, I have been looking at neural sensitivity to social threat and social reward as a key aspect of brain function that is related to youth mental health. And when I talk about social threat, I'm talking about perceived or actual experiences of rejection or exclusion. And when I'm talking about social reward, I'm thinking of perceived or actual experiences of acceptance, inclusion, or support. And of course, we think these are especially important when talking about peer relationships. And we know that youth have normative increases in neural responsivity to both social threat and social reward throughout adolescence as part of what we call the social reorientation of adolescence. But at the same time, altered reactivity, especially heightened reactivity to social threat and reward in an affective salience network of brain regions has been linked to mental health problems in adolescence. And when I'm talking about the affective salience network, I'm talking about regions that respond to and process threats and rewards in the environment, like the amygdala, the anterior insula, the subgenual anterior cingulate, and the nucleus accumbens, which is part of the ventral striatum. And so in my lab, we have shown that increased neural response to rejection and acceptance in these regions during simulated online interaction during neuroimaging, which I'll be telling you a little bit about, has been associated with depression, both diagnoses of depression and the development of depression over time, as well as suicidal ideation and social anxiety. So in the present study, we were interested in asking how social media experiences are associated with social threat and social reward processing in the brain. These data came from the teen screen study that we're conducting at the University of Pittsburgh, looking at the effects of social media on the development of suicidality. And so our participants were adolescents ages 12 to 17, assigned female at birth, 2/3 of whom were at high risk for suicide based on meeting at least one of the criteria below. So it was a very high-risk sample. And we had them complete questionnaires. I'll tell you about the social media behavior and experiences questionnaire in a minute. They completed the mood and feelings questionnaire to measure depressive symptoms, and the suicidal ideation questionnaire junior to measure suicidality. And they also did a functional MRI scan while interacting online with other, what they believed to be other girls who in fact were computer generated. So this is a preliminary analysis of the data with 52 participants. They were on average age 15, primarily white, and relatively high in depressive symptoms and suicidal ideation. So we measured social media behaviors and experiences using this social media behaviors and experiences questionnaire that was developed by Jessica Hamilton and Jackie Nisi. And this includes 40 negative and 40 positive experiences that teens are likely to encounter online. So for example, negative experiences include things like, I got blocked, unfriended, or unfollowed, or I saw posts and pictures that made me realize that I was not invited to a social event or activity. And positive experiences include things like, people said supportive or encouraging things to me, or I became friends with people that I have never met in person. To measure neural response to social threat and reward, we used the chat room interact task, which is a neuroimaging task that takes place over 2 visits. At the first visit, the participants are told that they're going to be interacting online at the scan at their next visit with other participants who will be at other sites. And they are asked to rank order which participants they are most interested in interacting with. Based on photographs and these profiles that you see a few examples of here. And then they provide their own biographical profile and photo that they are led to believe will be viewed by the girls at other sites so that they would be ranked as well. And then when they come back for the scan a couple weeks later, they're told that they've been matched with 2 of the girls that they had ranked highly and that they're ready to interact with them at the other sites. And while they're in the scanner, what happens is the participant and the 2 virtual peers are displayed on the screen 2 at a time as they take turns choosing who they would rather talk to about a series of teen interests like movies. And so it's rigged so that our participant is chosen or accepted half of the time and not chosen or rejected half of the time as well. And when they're accepted, this box appears around their face, and when they are rejected or not chosen, this X appears over their face as a salient cue of rejection. And so we compared the rejection trials and acceptance trials to control trials that I'll show you in a second, looking at these regions of interest that I previously mentioned. So for the control condition, they simply had to press a button to indicate whether a dot appeared on the face on the left or the right. So that was meant to control for the perceptual features of the task without having a social evaluative component. And so what did we find? Well, first of all, we looked at the link between the social media experiences and concurrent symptoms of psychopathology. And we found this extremely high correlation between negative social media experiences, this extremely high correlation between negative social media experiences and depressive symptoms and suicidality. These are the highest correlations I've ever seen in my entire career, and much higher than you typically see in psychological research, and most importantly, much higher than what we typically see for screen time and depressive symptoms and suicidality, which tends to be around 0.2. So this tells us that it is these specific types of negative experiences that kids are having that are really impactful. And interestingly, positive social media experiences were not significantly correlated with mental health, but there was this trend for positive experiences to be correlated with higher depressive symptoms, which was surprising to us, but sort of fits with what Annie was mentioning in the Mental Health Symposium yesterday about how sometimes positive reactivity to social media could actually be a risk factor too. And also it's important to note that there was a really high correlation between positive and negative experiences. So the same kids that are having a lot of positive experiences are also the same kids that are having a lot of negative experiences. Turning to the brain, we found that girls who were having less positive social media experiences had greater reactivity to actually rejection in this region called the anterior insula, which is basically generates subjective emotional experiences and is an area that's been shown to be heightened in adolescent depression. And then looking at negative social media experiences, we again found this crossover, where girls who were having a lot of negative social media experiences had heightened brain reactivity actually to acceptance. In two regions, the subgenual anterior cingulate, which is involved in monitoring, modulating, and generating emotional responses to social feedback, and this area has been really strongly linked to adolescent depression. And a similar effect in the nucleus accumbens, which is involved in detecting reward and threat contingencies, and also is related to depression. We thought that there would be that neural sensitivity to social rejection would moderate the links between social media experiences and our mental health outcomes, but we did not find that to be the case. So in conclusion, negative social media experiences are very, oh, I am sorry, I have been not showing you my slides. So there's the positive and the anterior insula, negative and the subgenual cingulate, and no moderation. Okay, so negative social media experiences appear very strongly related to symptoms of depression and suicidality, suggesting that these are key aspects driving social media's effects on mental health. And we really need to understand much more which of these experiences are most impactful and especially how to prevent them. It was surprising that positive experiences were not very protective, and I think this is something we have to really understand a lot better. And we found that few positive and more negative social media experiences may shape the brain to be more attuned to social evaluation. So when youth have fewer positive experiences online, this might signify lower social status or lower social connectedness. And so in that case, when they get rejected, the anterior insula reacts very strongly, perhaps because they're just really attuned to their social status. And then we found that youth with frequent negative experiences online were more responsive to acceptance and in these regions that are part of the reward circuit. And we think that might be because when you're very vigilant towards your social value and you mostly get negative feedback, when you get accepted, you might react very strongly because it's either unexpected or of high salience. And just to finish up, because I'm almost out of time, we think that although we didn't find moderation, we want to look and see whether neural sensitivity to social evaluation might actually mediate the effects between social media experiences and mental health. And also we think it's important to consider the reverse link. So it could be that symptoms or neural sensitivity are actually driving perceptions of social media experiences. And I think I'm out of time for questions, so catch me at the end.
Absolutely fascinating research. Thank you, Jennifer Silk. I'm excited about our last presentation today. It will be by Dr. Leonna Davis on body-enhanced social media images on Black women's body esteem, satisfaction, and attitudes towards cosmetic surgery. Leonna is an assistant professor in child and adolescent studies at Bowie State University with over 15 years of experience serving underserved communities. Dr. Davis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here to hear my presentation today. Before we get started, I would like to start with a show of hands of how many of you at some point in your journey have either idolized or felt your aesthetics or your sense of style were influenced by someone in the media. So we all have felt the impact that media has had on us. In today's presentation, I will talk specifically about the influence of body-enhanced social media images on the body esteem, satisfaction of young African American women's desires of cosmetic enhancements. This is April Brown. April Brown was a really happy woman who had everything going for herself, but there was just one thing that she felt was missing: a bigger butt. So what April did to try to solve that problem is she met someone who said that they did body enhancements and that they could do it in a hotel, and she paid the money and she got the procedure done. However, April didn't know what was being injected into her buttocks. In a total of 27 surgeries in the attempt to save her life, doctors had to amputate most of April's limbs in order to save her because she had contracted a staph infection from what was injected inside of her. April's story shines a light on this current trend of cosmetic enhancements amongst Black women and girls. Many seek this option as a way to enhance their body image and overall appearance, often discarding the potential risks and sometimes complications such as those we see that April have, and even sometimes worse, death. In 2020, Americans spent $9 billion on cosmetic surgeries, totaling in over 4.5 million procedures. Of those 4.5 procedures, 93% were performed on women. And keep in mind, this is only what has been reported from procedures done by board-certified plastic surgeons. Research has shown that appearance-focused social media has been associated with increase of cosmetic procedures performed in recent years, and also how research has consistently supported as well that consumption of appearance-focused social media impacts body satisfaction and self-esteem of young women and girls. So what don't we know? Much of the existing literature on this topic lacks representation in race, gender expression, and culture. There's very little research on how Black women process, or internalize body-enhanced imagery, and even less how it connects to this desire to want to get cosmetic enhancements and the impact on their self-esteem. Further, in understanding the historical context Black women in the U.S. experience as it relates to the hypersexualization and commodification of their bodies and sexuality. This population faces unique challenges due to the intersections of racism and sexism, which are amplified by systemic challenges they deal with on a daily basis. The current study hoped to fill that gap. The study was guided by 3 core hypotheses. First, looking at the exposure of body-enhanced images, how it would positively impact African American women's attitudes towards cosmetic surgery. Second, how exposure to body-enhanced images would, how exposure to body-enhanced images would decrease body esteem satisfaction. And last, how the relationship between exposure to body-enhanced images and attitudes towards cosmetic surgery would be mediated by body esteem satisfaction. Participants in the study consisted of African American women between the ages of 18 and 30, taken from an HBCU and community sample with a total of 179 participants. We conducted a between subject experiment that was advertised as a study on Instagram and Recall. The participants, next slide, let's see. The images used in the study were selected from a pool of 20 cosmetically enhanced Instagram images and 20 travel images. Here are a sample of each condition. For this study, there were two conceptual variables of interest: body esteem satisfaction and attitudes towards cosmetic surgery. These variables can be defined in many ways. However, we chose to operationalize them using the two measures. And for the interest of time, I will only be focusing on the subscales we found significance for. So to assess participants' attitudes towards cosmetic surgery, the acceptance of cosmetic surgery scale was used, and it was a 15-item measure consisting of 3 subscales: interpersonal, social, and consideration for cosmetic surgery. To assess participants' feelings around body esteem satisfaction, the multidimensional body self-relations questionnaire appearance scale was used. It was a 34-item measure with 5 subscales, as you can see, things such as appearance evaluation, self-classified weight, and body area satisfaction. For interest of time, I will quickly go through the procedures of the study. So participants were randomly assigned to one of 3 conditions. They either seen images of body enhancements of Black women, white women, or travel images. Once assigned, they were asked various demographic questions. They were asked about the exposure and the impact of seeing this type of body enhanced images on social media when they first seen it and the impact that it had on them. They were also asked about their media use, how much time they spent on social media, as well as the top social media sites that they tended to look at, which were Instagram, as well as Snapchat and Twitter. After they completed an image viewing task in which they were shown a sequence of 10 Instagram images of women with the enhancements, and then they completed the 2 self-report measures, and then once done, they were debriefed, given information about the true aims of the study, and an opportunity to leave comments, which many of them did. I forgot I had these little arrows to help. Okay. So for our first hypothesis, results of a one-way ANOVA revealed significance for the subscale, consideration for cosmetic surgery, which measured the likelihood one would get cosmetic surgery. We found that participants who seen body-enhanced images of Black women scored higher on desiring cosmetic surgery compared to participants in the control who seen the travel images. For our second hypothesis, results for a one-way ANOVA revealed significance for the subscale, appearance evaluation, which measured feelings of physical attractiveness or unattractiveness and satisfaction or dissatisfaction with one's looks. So when participants seen body-enhanced images of Black women, they scored lower on body esteem satisfaction compared to when when participants seen white body-enhanced images or were in the travel condition. The mediation analysis revealed there were no evidence that body esteem mediated this relationship. So to make sense of the results, in looking at this population and looking at past literature, media influence, in particular for Black women and how they see themselves portrayed in the media, oftentimes can be in a hypersexualized way. So whether it's in music videos or engaging in Instagram postings, as well as looking at reality TV, oftentimes there's a negative perception and a hyper focus on sexuality and oftentimes even body aesthetics. For our hypothesis 2 to explain, looking at group membership. So one thing to think about is the women in the study, when they were in the group seeing the images of Black women, the result is that seeing these images had an influence because they seen themselves in the women that they were seeing, in those photos. And again, looking to the influence of media and how Black women are portrayed oftentimes in media, and that having an impact as well. So some limitations for the study. So although the findings contribute to a greater understanding of potential causal role that social media plays to women's consideration of wanting cosmetic enhancements, some limitations to point out are the research design, and could we even conclude if the findings are actual just by seeing a one-time brief period of them seeing the images. So however, despite this concern, brief exposure to body-enhanced images showed evidence of an effect. In that participants' esteem or desire were influenced. Future research definitely could look at long-term exposure, various time periods, or even longitudinal studies to get a better sense of what's happening. So implications of this work, we definitely need to see more research done in this area, as well as even in looking at the women in this study, despite them being more in the late adolescence group, we are really interested in seeing what this research could look like for even younger girls. So if even this age group was impacted, what is happening for younger girls who might be engaging with this content? Also paying attention to the mental health ramifications. And so research has supported, and my colleagues have spoke about also, anxiety being a result of seeing media that is focused on appearance for girls, as well as experiences with depression and even body dysmorphia has been seen in some research. So what next? My team and I are in the process of developing an intervention that we hope will empower Black girls in digital spaces. The hope is that we will have youth be at the center of designing the intervention through youth participatory action research. In this media literacy intervention, hoping to deconstruct and counter narratives. And so the negative messages that Black girls may see online about themselves, whether that is about their skin complexion or the size of their body or how their body looks, and countering those negatives by empowering them and giving them a lens to be able to not only understand and engage the media that they're seeing, but give them an opportunity to create their own digital footprint where they are taking charge of what they're seeing. And so we're hoping that this intervention helps to build body image resilience and identity development, but that is also centered in their culture and rooted in joy and healing. Thank you for listening, and I will now take questions if I have.
And I apologize for the lack of questions. We're on a tight schedule today, and we're out of time, and I thank you all for being here. Thanks to all the panelists. I feel like we've covered so many different topics and really important research.